What's Matt up to today?
I don't know. Matt's working on the Daytona.
Is there something he wants us to do?
Oh, I'd imagine there's a great deal he wants us to do.
Real cars, real people,
Real budgets.
This is Garage X.
Morning.
Morning. Where do you want this thing?
Oh, right on the bench would be just fine.
Well, we're back from the welder. So what's the next thing that we got to do, Jesse?
Well, now we go to we're gonna cut down some of the welds by hand, so it's not so hard on the actual counterbore cutters.
We're gonna kind of pre-shape it, get some of the excess metal off of these
Yeah.
the valve seat area. All right. And what do we do that with?
Just a handheld carbide Dremel.
Nice.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, I'm
No,
guessing.
no, we're just gonna get it close. That's all we're looking for is close.
All right. Well, show us how it's done.
All right.
It can be a cruel world when time chews on you. 10 years roll on by like another day. And in the morning, the sun brings the same. Same old tired dreams as yesterday. Yeah.
All right.
That's it?
We're all set.
Nice. So what's next?
Now we can start cutting the seats out on the new TNS machine.
That's the brand new valve seat machine.
Brand new seat and guide machine, yes.
Yeah, Mark was pretty excited about sharing that with our viewers. So.
Yeah.
Awesome. What's that? Heck of a machine.
It is. This is our new TNS seat and guide machine.
Wow. So what does it do?
This is where we do all our valve jobs, install our seats and valve guides.
Nice. And so today we're cutting new pockets for the valve seats themselves, right?
Correct.
And then I actually need to do a little port work in the cylinder head, and then we'll come back and we'll do the valve job, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Great. Well, I'm excited to see how this thing works. I guess it really makes it easier for you guys to put valve
Certainly
seats in.
does. Certainly does. Everything used to be done on 3 different machines. Now it's all done on 1.
Oh, that's cool. That's neat.
It's a lot quicker, a lot easier, a lot more accurate.
All right. Well, let's get to it.
Let's do it.
So what is that?
That's a pilot. It sits in the valve guide.
It just presses in there?
It's just a press, yeah.
Okay, cool. And that's what guides the cutter tool
Yeah.
down into the head?
Yep.
Very
That's
nice.
where everything's centered off of to keep everything in line with the valve guide, with the seats, and that's where it is. So we got our pilot installed. Now we gotta level the head again so everything's cutting true and straight.
Okay. It's riding on an air pocket?
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's all floating. It's awesome. It's awesome. Everything's sensitive.
Yeah.
So here we're matching the cylinder head front to rear on the angle.
And that's a level?
That is a level, yeah.
Wow.
So we're at 0.08 of a degree. Pretty straight. That's matched to the machine itself.
Okay.
And we take a measurement of our side to side. 0.18. And we match the machine to the cylinder head now.
You can actually adjust the angle of the cutting head,
Yep. There it is.
but ideally you want it to cut exactly in the same planes as the valve guide there.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
You want it to be perfect in line with the valve guide so everything is true in the end.
Nice.
All right, so our head's set, our machine's set. Now it's time to start cutting. cutting the seats now, cutting the aluminum. We need to cut as fast as we can without shattering. So now is just a test fit of our seats to make sure all of our cutters are set correct. We just use a little bit of Loctite and hammer the new seats in. Just a couple of drops here and there. Perfect.
It can be a cruel world when time chews on you. 10 years roll on by like another day. These are the fears of the dead. Your wishes won't let them go away. These are the minds that you'll find when you fall in behind the enemy's lines.
So now we have to install the exhaust seats, and we're going to use a little bit of a keyboard duster, which is just CO2 in a can. We'll flip the can upside down, we'll get the actual CO2. It'll put a real deep freeze on the seats and shrink them even more.
Hard rain in the morning time. Well, I'd rather be left alone.
All right, Jesse, so what's the next part here? How do we do this magical port work?
Well, really we're not going to be doing any porting. We're just going to kind of clean up the clean the ports a little bit.
Okay, because I mean, we don't have a flow bench.
Correct.
And without a flow bench, you can make changes in there, but you don't know if you're making good changes or bad changes.
Yeah, you can do a lot of damage in a real short amount of time if you don't know what you're doing and you don't have the flow bench.
So what is our objective? What can I do with say, a carbide tool in here to make improvements?
Well, we're just going to do some tried and true stuff that's guaranteed to improve flow.
Okay.
We're going to get rid of sharp edges.
Yeah.
We're going to clean up casting flash. We're gonna clean the short side radius.
And that's the one that's the shorter turn, the one that's at the bottom of the head, if you will.
Yeah, if where it transitions from the valve seat to the port on the
Okay.
floor is what is the short side radius.
Right, okay.
And there's always a nice sharp edge right there, so we'll go and we'll round it out.
So really it's about smoothing that bowl area that's underneath the valve into the intake port or channel in there, cleaning up casting, flashing, and taking away any sharp edges, because that's going to build turbulence in the flow and reduce how efficient the head is, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, I would ask that you, I know you're pretty good at this. You've done this a lot more than I ever have. Would you do a set for me, and then I mean, I can do the rest of them once I see kind of what you're doing.
Absolutely.
All right.
Electricity's
So yeah, that sharp edge is gone relatively quick.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it doesn't take much.
Yeah. Yeah, what a difference.
Yep. go. There's about all we're gonna do on the intake.
So what's the next step now that we've cleaned up the bowl area?
Well, I'm gonna do the same to the exhaust. And then after that, we're gonna flip the head over and start working on the gasket side, the manifold side.
And then addressing the chamber, what are we doing here? I mean, I assume we're going to clean up kind of the residual where the weld is.
Yep. We'll finish cleaning up the last bits of the weld. We're gonna kind of polish the chamber a little bit and get rid of any last sharp edges.
Yeah, okay.
But we do need to watch out with the chambers, because you take off. The more you take off,
Yeah.
the bigger the chamber is,
right, yeah.
the lower your compression. But if you're doing a forced induction, that's not a bad thing anyway. There it is.
That's it, huh?
That's it.
All right, so that's the final shaping.
Yes.
And then all that's left is gasket matching, and well, obviously in replicating this for the next 3 holes.
Yeah,
It takes a little while, huh?
it does. And this was an easy head too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Wow. All right.
But yeah, all our shaping's done.
Our weld's cleaned up nice.
The weld did clean up nice. Yeah, your welder did a fantastic job.
Awesome. I'm sure he'll be glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that short side radius, what a difference, man.
Yeah.
That's really going to help this thing breathe.
Oh yeah. And then we don't need a flow bench for that.
No, we don't. So I guess the rest of this is up to me, huh?
It is. Hope you were paying attention.
There we go.
That's it.
All right. Well, I'll get the other 3 holes done, and then we'll come back for the final valve job.
That's it.
All right.
And then we'll have some fun.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see what I can do. Yeesh.
Hold up on that car, wise gentlemen. So that was the point where I stopped working on the cylinder head. I packed everything up and I came back to the shop. I mean, it was going to take me quite a while to finish doing the port work that Jesse had showed us, and I didn't want to hold those guys up any more than I already had. Also, I didn't really feel like I knew what the heck I was doing yet. I wanted to be able to come back here where I could kind of work at my own pace, really take my time with it. And besides, the whole point of this is to see what kind of porting you can do in your own shop, in your own garage. So after doing a bunch of research, reading some articles and watching some YouTubes, I finally felt like I had my head around it. I figured out what abrasives and tools I was going to need, and I went out and got anything that we didn't have here at the shop already. Now, I'm a big fan of buying American. I mean, quality stuff built in the USA, and I hate cheap tools. So I'm a little embarrassed to tell you where I found a lot of this stuff, but let's just say it's a place where sometimes freight gets harbored. But the truth of the matter is they had unbeatable prices on the rotary tool we needed. And they've even got this cool abrasive roll kit. It comes with the arbor that you need to spin this on your rotary. So it's like everything you need for the porting in one cheap kit. It's hard to beat. And I even splurged a little bit. I bought myself a set of real cylinder head stands online. It may not be worth it if you're only doing this once, but I got more cylinder heads in my future, so I went for it. Well, so much for not spending a bunch of money remanding my own head, huh? At least this way I know the kind of quality that's going into the work, and I get a chance to unlock some performance in this head that a standard remand's never going to have. I mean, it's more money in the end, but that's hot rodding, right? All right, so we're just about ready to get started. The first thing we're going to be doing is cleaning up any of the casting flash in the intake channels, and then we're going to be smoothing that short turn radius, that sharp edge that's there between where the intake channel and the valve bowl meet at the floor of the intake runner. Now, before you get started, it's important. You're going to want to have hearing protection and eye protection. And you're also going to want to wear some kind of dust mask or respirator because you don't want to breathe any of this stuff. It's not good for you. And let's try our hand at it.
So I'm using 80 and 180 sandpaper rolls for most of this work. They cut kind of slow, but they leave a nice smooth finish behind. I'll break out the carbide for the worst of it, but I'm going to use it really sparingly. I mean, this head's not that bad, and I don't really trust myself with this tool yet, so I'll take it easy. Once the big chunks are cut out with the carbide, I go back to the sandpaper roll, and I'm just going to smooth out the work that I did.
A beast is brought back to life. You have control over no one is waiting at your side. I see your bad dreams, they hang like before in the night. Burning your bridges, or fires lighting sky. I see your smile slowly fading as the winter takes control. You'll have control over nothing. Nothing is what you feel.
So now that I got the valve bowl area all smoothed out, I'm going to flip the head and work from the intake manifold flange side. It's a much straighter shot, so it's a lot easier to get to, and it also gives you a chance to kind of check your work. You're looking at it from another angle to see if there's anything you've missed, any spots you got to go back and touch up. At this point, I'm staying away from the mouth of the ports on the manifold side. I don't want to change their size or shape. We'll come back to that when we do the gasket matching. I'm just reaching down into those ports, smoothing out any of the casting flashes that I can see, and working the backside of that short side radius. Now let's take a look at the combustion chamber. We still got the rest of the welds from the crack repair that we did. We want to smooth that down. And then we actually want to radius and smooth any of the hard edges that are cast into the valve area and around the spark plug hole in there. Having a nice smooth surface in the combustion chamber is going to be critical to avoiding detonation when this thing's on the road, especially if we start cranking up the boost on this turbocharged engine. Now I'm going to switch over from the rotary to my electric Dremel. It's a lighter tool, it's easier to use, it's much more nimble in this delicate area. So we're using 120 grit flap wheels for this work. They're small wheels, so they get into the nice tight corners really well, and they leave a nice smooth finish when we're done. I don't have to worry too much about sanding around the valve seat area. We haven't cut the valve seats yet. We'll do that at the valve job. So right now I can get in there nice and tight. Any of the scuff marks that I make on these seats, we're going to cut out when we do the valve job back at Nashua Engine Rebuilders. But that's why we wait to do the valve job until after the port and polish work is done. All right, it's time to do some gasket matching. I'm gonna use the Dykem blue metal die in order to have something I can scribe my lines into, but you can use a permanent marker if you want. The idea here is that we're using the intake gasket as a template so we know what size and shape we're gonna be cutting the outside edge of those ports to. So we're gonna be matching our intake ports right to the edges of the gasket. Now, for the exhaust side though, we're gonna leave about 1 millimeter of material, a perimeter around the inside of that gasket. And the reason we do that is that if there's any mismatch between the manifolds and the port on our head, we want the air charge to be stepping down into the next piece. So as it moves from the intake manifold into the intake port on the head, if there's any mismatch, it steps down into the head. It doesn't hit a wall or a little dam around the edge and swirl. Now on the exhaust side, the hot exhaust gas is coming out. Again, if there's any mismatch between the head and that exhaust manifold, the exhaust gas is stepped down into the exhaust manifold. And be careful, don't just blindly cut the size of the hole to the size of the gasket. In our case, in this motor, on the intake side, there's one part where the intake gasket makes a much bigger hole than what you're gonna find in the head or in the intake manifold itself. So for the 2.2s, you actually wanna cut to fit the sides and the ceiling of the port, but you actually want to leave the intake floor alone. You don't want to expand it to the size of the gasket because you'd end up with like a bubble, an aneurysm in your intake runner, and that's not good for the intake charge airspeed. I just switched to a carbide here because I didn't realize how much material we were going to be removing. And the carbide gave me a much cleaner cut up at the very edge where the sandpaper rolls tended to fray a little bit, and then they'd wipe my line off the top of the intake manifold flange. So start with the carbide, cut back to about where you need to be, and then finish with the sandpaper rolls. And then you can use the sandpaper to go down into the intake channel and smooth these fresh cuts into the intake runner. So we're almost done, but I gotta add a little texture to the intake ports. Everything's finished to about 180 grit right now. It's nice and smooth, but it's probably a little too smooth for a wet intake, an intake where fuel and air are moving together through it. I'm gonna go back in with my rotary and an 80 grit roll. I'm using a really, really low tool speed and a lot of pressure, and I'm scratching up the inside of that intake manifold runner. Like we said, that's gonna help keep the fuel molecules in suspension as the fuel and air charge is moving through the intake ports. Now, there's plenty of theories out there about what kind of texture you should use or how rough the floor should be versus the ceilings and the walls. We're going to stick to the basics for now. I don't think we need to get too fancy to see some real results. Well, that's about it for our at-home port and polish job. We went and smoothed over the short turn radius. We cleaned up all the casting flash in the intake runners, and then we gasket matched those intake runners to the intake gasket that we're going to be using. We also went into the combustion chamber. We cleaned up the welds from the crack repair that we did, and then we smoothed everything over so that it helps resist detonation while it's on the road. Now, I'll probably spend some time with that head, just looking it over to make sure I haven't missed anything, but we're at just over 7 hours right now, and that's the basics of an at-home port job. I can't say I'm completely satisfied with the sandpaper roll kit that I got. We broke 3 of the arbors. Luckily I had 2 kits, so I had 1 left over, and that was enough to get the job done. And a lot of the sandpaper rolls actually came unwound as I was using them and would like spiral up the arbor and get all bunched up on top of my rotary tool where they weren't doing me any good. But that's my problem with cheap tools, right? You always get what you pay for. Well, now all we gotta do is get this thing back to Nashua Engine Rebuilders and have Jesse help us do a valve job.
Hey Garage X viewers, need some more Garage X? Comments, complaints, questions? Check us out on the internet. Send us an email, check out our Facebook, and definitely check out our YouTube for outtakes and other goodies.
In the throes of these 4 rooms, bright and iron and withered fumes. Far below these sinful means, gold has flown through loosened streams.